Lovely. If we could all come back together again, that would be great. Sorry. Fabulous. There may well be sort of questions and comments, and if you could please write them down for the moment. There will be Q&A time towards the end, and if you don't get your question answered, do come and grab me afterwards, or grab one of the Go team as well. Super. Right. So it is time to draw again, and as I promised you an example of my own artistic endeavours. I don't know what happened to the foot. I'm sorry, it just didn't happen well. Could you do something similar but better on your piece of paper? You could use the reverse of your child paper, it really doesn't matter, or a fresh piece, whichever you like. But just draw something resembling like a gingerbread man, gingerbread person with a sort of skeleton inside them. It's not a six-pack, Tony, no. It's a rib cage. Fabulous. Fabulous. What I thought might be just fun to do, just to kind of think about our own situations, your own situation, whether you're a vicar or a children's minister or a youth minister, or you work in a school, or you're a chaplain, or you're a member of the congregation with a heart for this. Whoever you are, whatever your situation is, I thought it'd be quite good to just pick up on that. You know the image from 1 Corinthians 12, the famous one of, you are the body of Christ, and the body needs lots of limbs, and you can't tell one part of the body that you're not needed. It's that image that I just want to play with for a little while. So I'm just thinking about various bits. So do colour these in, or draw them in as we go along. The first part is your either your gut or your heart, depending on how romantic you're feeling. But I think just put a circle around those, or point or an arrow leading to them. And I want to think for a moment about bringing about change where you are in terms of spiritual change. And you might be thinking, gut, spiritual change, how does that work? But I think actually in Bible times, the gut is actually a very spiritual place. It's the seat of lots of kind of deep emotion. And that word, when Jesus is moved with compassion, when he sees the man with leprosy, the word is his guts moved. So for them, for that culture, it was very much the seat of the emotions. It's where some really literally visceral stuff happens. But sometimes we prefer to call it the heart, because it's nicer. So heart, the emotional stuff, the spiritual stuff. And just doodle on your piece of paper while we think about this. If we're talking about spiritual change, think about change around the way that you pray. Prayer is obviously key to spiritual change. If you were putting children and young people at the heart of your prayer life, what might that look like? So you don't need to come out with instant answers now if you're a person who likes to process longer, but just jot something down on your picture so that you've got it to think about later when perhaps you have more time. So either your prayer life individually, what would that look like? Or as a church, as your body of Christ, what might putting young people at the heart of your prayer life, what might that look like? Okay? And you might also want to think, it's tied up with the spiritual side, our emotions. What's your heart's longing in this field? What is your real heart for when it comes to children and young people? What's your heart's longing? And what's the heart's longing of your church? Can you put your finger on that? What would it be? And if you feel like going back into the gut, then what's your gut feeling? We say that, don't we? What's your gut feeling about the way ahead? Is there something God's been sort of niggling at you about? A gut feeling that if you could just try this particular approach, it would take a bit of courage, but maybe that would be the way forward. Have you got a gut feeling about anything? And next, the head bit, the face bit in particular. We thought about spiritual change. What about change in perception? And we're thinking about ears and eyes and mouth, I suppose. I don't think we'd better get into smelling. Could end up in some unpleasant places. But what about listening to children and young people? How can that happen in your community, in your church, parish? How can you use your ears and listen to the voice of children and young people? We've got eyes. How do we actually see children and young people, their families? What would that involve? Do you see any at the moment? Where are they? What do you see when you see them? Some people just see, oh, it's a bunch of hoodies going down the road, I'll walk on the other side. What do you see as a church, as well as you as an individual? And obviously we've got mouths for speaking the good news. So alongside the listening, what opportunities are there for sharing the good news of Jesus Christ? The salvation, the healing for a broken world. What opportunities do you have for that? Might want to put a circle around the hands next. Thinking about change that could be made on a practical level. What possible changes, and don't get hooked up with, oh, but we can't because. Don't get hooked up with the obstacles, just dream dreams for a moment. If you were putting children and young people at the heart of your church, of your parish, what practical changes might there need to be for things that involve your hands? Something like we hold money with our hands. So what changes might there need to be to our budget as a church? You've got a watch on your hand as well. What about use of time? What would that involve? What about the physical things? A lot of us in children's ministry spend a lot of time moving furniture. What about the stuff around the church? Would there need to be any physical changes to stuff around your church building, for example, that would make it a place that welcomes children, puts children first? Practical changes. How does that work? It wasn't a six-pack, Tony, it was a skeleton. And skeletons vital, unseen. What about structural change in your church? Is there anything that would need to change to put children and young people at the heart of your structures? So what is it that the hidden stuff that keeps your church ticking? The way it's organised, the way it's governed. How could children and young people be at the heart of that? How could the voices of children and young people be heard on the PCC? Last but one, your feet. Feet around going out, which is such a huge part of the Great Commission. When Jesus says, go and make disciples of all nations. And where would you need to go to find children in your parish? Where would you need, well, it's the Go team as well. Oh, that's creepy, in a good way. Where would you need to go to if children aren't with you already? Where would you move out to? What sort of moving out would need to be done by you or your church? And the last one is the little plus sign and a question mark down at the bottom, because I've only touched on a few limbs and organs, and I suspect that you might be thinking, especially those of you with a sort of who work with metaphors a lot, might be thinking, I can think of some more organs that would be really symbolic here. So is there something else in the body of Christ that you think could be symbolic of change? Is there some organ? I'm not even going to go there. I once made the mistake of doing a very similar thing with a group of Swedes who are not at all bashful about parts of the body, and I'm just not going to specify any more. But are there any other parts of these wonderful bodies that we have that really resonates with you for putting children and young people at the heart of what your church is doing? Fabulous. Just a way of thinking about some of the changes that we could think about when we're thinking about putting children and young people at the heart of what we're doing. And sometimes it's painful and costly and it seems insurmountable. We're never going to get our congregation to this point. But sometimes thinking about it in the big picture means that when you're coming down to one change, just one change, then that is enough. Jesus always took his disciples on one step at a time. And I think going one step, making one of those changes, for some people will be just the right thing to do, rather than getting tied up with all the things that we can't do, thinking about one thing that we can do, one change that we can make, and God will take us on one step at a time in the direction he needs us to. Thank you.